Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, a future of work consultancy. And today with me is Daniel Robinson. He is a writer for MarketWatch Guides, and he has expertise in electric vehicles. So, Daniel, can you tell us a little bit more about what you see the electric vehicle market currently looking like?
Well, I think we're in a little bit of a strange spot because we have a lot of automakers that want to have aggressive rollouts of new EVs in the coming months, and it doesn't seem like the demand is quite there, and the charging infrastructure might be lagging a bit
Mm.
as well. You combine those things with the federal government that is really pushing for accelerated
Mhm.
adoption, and the EPA possibly putting forward some pretty strict emission standards here that would take effect in about 5 years.
Mm.
So all those things kind of coming together at one time, I think has us in a little bit of a confusing situation right now. I'm as confused as anyone, I'll be honest.
All right. Well, you have some knowledge about this topic, so let's talk a little bit about how we can make things less confusing. And let's go a little bit deeper into a couple of those. So tell me a little bit more about the federal government. Of course, the Inflation Reduction Act had a lot of infrastructure work to be done on electric vehicle charging, related issues. But of course, and recently the permitting has been, in my understanding, is the permitting situation has been eased by the compromise that was passed in the federal government. So hopefully that will make permitting a little bit easier. Tell me what it looks like with the federal government, the Inflation Reduction Act, and what that's going to bring about.
Well, I think the biggest thing with that, with the Inflation Reduction Act, is the charging infrastructure is a big part of that, and wanting to
Mhm.
move more EV production and battery production to North America. I think those are
Mm.
some of the real drivers of that part of the act. So with all that, I think the idea is that prices on EVs will moderate a bit and get more in line with the American consumer right now.
Mhm.
I'm hoping all those things will work together again to bring prices down and just get
Mhm.
people a little more excited about driving EVs. I
Mm.
know, personally speaking, I am. I'm more interested and more excited about it than I've ever been. But I do understand the reluctance and the confusion that a lot of consumers do have right now about making that jump to
Mm.
EVs.
And let's talk a little bit about the obstacles. So you said that there's some challenges, and the infrastructure is one challenge. But what you talked about, the Made in America component, I imagine that's going to be another challenge. What I've seen in the EV market is that China is producing a great deal of innovative EV technology, whether it's batteries, cars, and so on. And that's becoming a pretty dominant global player, considering that Tesla was the starter of the EV market. So, what are you seeing internationally in the EV market? And given the focus on Made in America in the US, how will that impact the US?
Well, again, I think one of the big focal points right now is trying to stave off um, China as an innovator in this arena, and I think automakers and the federal government all are trying to find the right balance between moving too quickly and sort of falling behind a little bit. They don't
Mm.
want China to fill that gap in North America and in Europe. I think Europe especially is facing those issues too. Um,
Mm.
it's Tesla obviously has a huge head start on a lot of these
Mhm.
other automakers, and I think they're in a lot of ways Tesla's going to lead the way
Mhm.
in this whole thing. I think they already have with the pretty significant price cuts early this year. Despite bringing prices way down, they've had an amazing first half of 2023, and I think we've seen Ford and a few other companies follow suit with some price
Mhm.
cuts. I think that will continue. And I think that in concert with more federal investment in charging infrastructure will bring people to a better comfort level with EVs in general. And I think the idea behind all that is to stave off, yeah, um, Chinese-made EVs and chargers and everything else that goes into this equation. So I think again, that's why we're in kind of a strange spot right now. We're facing the specter of Chinese innovation, along with trying to find the sweet spot for consumer demand and profits for the automakers. Everybody's working to find that right balance, and it's tough.
Yeah, sounds challenging. Now, with Tesla, you mentioned that they're ahead of everyone. One thing that they've done, and I was a little surprised by it, you can tell me what you think about it, is letting others join their charging infrastructure, because that seemed to be a little, at least a part of their secret sauce, the rapid infrastructure. What do you think will be the impact of Tesla letting pretty much all the other players join their charging infrastructure? How will that shape the EV market?
I think it makes a huge difference. And I think you see really every couple of days now, it seems like another big name agrees to accept the Tesla fast charging standard. And it's gonna make a big difference in the whole thing. I know there are other players in that market who are would like to have a bigger share, but I think Tesla is such a name and such a brand at this point. Yeah, that can only help. And I really do hope. I'm a Volkswagen driver. My wife is a big Volkswagen fan, and they are currently negotiating with Tesla to adopt that fast charging standard. So I think it's great. I think it will help with adoption pretty immensely, and just clear up some of the confusion and some of the reluctance from drivers who are afraid they're not going to have reliable charging options out in the wild, right? Out on a long road trip. I know that battery range and somewhat limited battery range for the lower price point EVs is kind of a challenge. And so I think the more reliable, relatively fast charging stations you have out there, just in gas stations and hotel parking lots and wherever else out there, yeah, that can only help. So I'm really excited about that.
So let's talk a little bit more about the consumer obstacles. So I'm glad that we're talking about how people can have more charging infrastructure, but it's definitely a cause of fear for people. So how would you assuage people's fears that they will not have access to charging infrastructure on a long drive?
Well, I'm reminded of Volkswagen cut EV production pretty significantly just a few weeks ago in Europe, and their leadership cited customer reluctance for the reason. I feel like automakers need to be more clear about how simple it really can be to charge on the road and how easy it is to charge at home. I feel like I know I was not very clear on that until fairly recently. A good friend of mine bought a Tesla Model Y early this year, and it's a simple thing. It's basically a laptop charger, like a longer version of a laptop charging cord, right? And you don't need a special outlet. It is pretty slow to charge that way, but charging overnight, you should be able to get pretty close to a full charge. But yeah, I just think clarifying people's expectations and just communicating. I don't feel like I've seen a whole lot of that from the big automakers. You see a lot of, TV ads with celebrities driving these things and stuff like that, but I just don't think, the real nuts and bolts of it has been explained very well to consumers. It should be simple and easy, and I think once you get through all the how-tos and the fine print, it really is pretty easy. But I think automakers can do a much better job of communicating that.
Interesting. I hope they do. But let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts. One of the things I think very few consumers realize is the total lifetime cost of owning an EV versus owning a traditional gas combustion vehicle, internal combustion vehicle. That even if you pay somewhat more upfront, the total cost of EV ownership is going to be lower, large majority of the time over the lifetime of the vehicle. Can you break down those nuts and bolts for us and explain why it is actually lower?
Well, the cost of gas would be the one that's going to hit people right away. I've
Mm.
seen it. I've seen home charging priced out a few different ways from a few different types of EVs, but I think even charging overnight, of basically a full charge, maybe cost you $5 to $10 on your electric bill,
Mhm.
and filling up your car at the gas station is going to cost a whole lot more than that.
Mhm.
Um, no oil changes, things like that. The routine maintenance is totally different for EVs and not as demanding. Um, so that upfront cost barrier, which is there now,
Mhm.
and I think that hurdle will get lower with every passing year, if not every passing quarter, the way things are going. Um, I do think if we can get past that barrier to entry, yeah, the long term savings of driving an EV um, are significant. And if you price it out, I think you'll find that it's kind of a different world. So yeah, I hope
Mhm.
that's another thing that these companies can communicate
Yeah.
much more clearly, and I expect them to, and I hope they
Mhm.
will.
Yeah, it's one reason I've seen people talk about getting a hybrid electric versus and so on. And that's really not a very good option in terms of maintenance because you have two engines to maintain rather than one. So definitely not the best option there. Now, let's talk a little bit about specifically the maintenance, because I think one source of reluctance I've seen is both the car types, people who like to work on their cars who are not familiar with how to work on electric cars, and mechanics who are not familiar with EVs, especially all those computer gadgets that EVs come with, which seem much more complex than the internal combustion engine. What role do you think that challenge in terms of the computerization, the digitalization of the car, the lack of skills of working on the car by the person, the car owner, and by the mechanics? What role is that playing as an obstacle?
Uh, I think they're there. I think they're significant. Just from what I've seen, driving an EV is different, and they're they're little things. But when you've been driving a certain way, for some people, what, 30, 40, 50 years, it's a challenge. And
Mm.
as far as not having enough properly trained technicians, I think that's going to be a challenge um, for the entire EV market and for the insurance providers as well.
Mm. Mm.
Um, I think we've got a shortage of properly trained mechanics and technicians for conventional vehicles. So
Mm.
for EVs, it's going to be, yeah, this is just another another challenging aspect
Mm.
of the whole situation. But yeah, from what I've seen, firsthand and online and everything, there's definitely an adjustment period to driving a
Mm.
lot of these EVs. They do function a little bit differently. Just the mechanics of driving, leaving aside some of the bells and whistles.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just another reality that we've got to face up to here in this adoption process.
And you mentioned insurance. What is the insurance rate implication for EV adoption?
Well, right now, the fact that most all of the EVs on the road are priced higher than standard combustion engine vehicles,
Mhm.
um, that leads to some higher premiums right there by itself. And you've got the fact that EV batteries are so expensive, and replacing one is going to be prohibitive for most
Mhm.
drivers out there if they get into an accident. There's also There's also the issue of the weight of the cars. EVs are significantly heavier than their combustion engine counterparts. So, yeah, a lot of factors play into that. Insurance companies are going to have to reconfigure some of their coverage options and their underwriting practices based around the specific risks that EVs carry with them.
Well, let's not forget the explosion risks.
And there's that. Yeah. It's
It does
there's a
happen.
lot of work to do. There really is. And yeah, I'm hoping that a little extra pressure from the federal government isn't a bad thing. I'm hoping that automakers can kind of tighten things up and follow suit and really speed the adoption without just breaking things, right? Or having cars explode.
Okay. So what do you see? It sounds like there are a number of challenges. What do you see as happening? What is the future of the EV market in the next couple of years?
I think with a broader selection of EVs, which we're going to be seeing in the next 6 months to a year, more buyer segments and more types of EVs. You see so many compact cars and small crossover SUVs in the EV field right now. You see a lot of those on the road. I think we're going to see more and more larger pickups, larger family-sized SUVs hitting the market, and I think you'll continue to see prices moderate as there's more competition from all the big automakers that are such big names in our country. So I think everything will come together, but we are in a weird time right now with some growing pains. I think trying to get the infrastructure and the price points and all those things to work together in a way that really serves consumers. But I do think it's going to happen. I think it's going to 5 years from now. I know there are some really ambitious targets from the federal government and from GM, especially. I think they want to have a fully, zero emission fleet by 2035, which is not all that far away. So I think it'll happen. There are going to be some more growing pains, but I'm excited. I'm more excited than I've ever been about it. I'm thinking about getting in one of these things here in the next year at least, and see what my own experience is like driving one.
Yeah, I think when my own car dies, I'll probably get an EV as well. Well, good. This is an excellent note on which to end. Thank you for sharing your expertise.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, wherever you check this out, and leave a review. It really helps us improve the show, and it helps other people discover the show. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, and in the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.